welcome you all to the session on the US and similar to this. Some of you have been involved in this as well. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the speakers who are here. This is structured as a panel discussion. And as we try and make it as informal as possible, we have with us, I'll start from my right, Mr. John Podesta, who is the President and CEO for the Center for American Progress. Sorry, Mr. Podesta is there. Mr. Suresh Prabhu, who you all know, the former Minister of Environment and Forests. Before that, he was also the Minister of Power. We have on his right Mr. Jonathan Lash, President of the World Resources Institute, and Mr. Jamshid Godrej, who is the Chairman and Managing Director of Godrej Boys, is also a trustee of WRF. We'd like to have each of the speakers introduce themselves briefly, the whole subject, what we're doing on this present side, and take it forward from the viewpoint of our respective countries. And it's more than we throw the topic open and then give a chance for discussion, questions and answers. I would very much like you to take into account the fact that this is a subject that is very dear to all of us. It's very, very important. It's been dealt with and in great detail in several areas. And if there is a detail required as to what's happening, we'll be very happy as WWF to supply some of the backgrounds to the demonstrations and issues as they develop. May I please request Mr. John Podesta to start, give us his views, and then followed by Mr. Suresh Prabhu.
Well, thank you for joining us all today. And Robbie introduced me. I run a progressive think tank in Washington, D.C., Center for American Progress. We've done substantial work on trying to move the United States into a leadership position from a position of being a laggard on both clean energy development and climate change. He noted that I was President Clinton's chief of staff. I also had the honor of running the transition period for President Obama. And I guess I would begin by saying that there probably a lot of the reporting here is about what the United States can't get done right now on clean energy and climate change. Our United States Senate just bogged down on a comprehensive clean energy and climate bill this summer, but I like to think of the glass as at least partially full. With the election of President Obama, he, in the course of the campaign, argued that we needed to really reorient the United States, bring it back to as a noted, leadership position, make substantial investments in moving the United States from a high carbon fossil fuel base in its energy production to one that was built on clean energy. And I think he has been able to do a substantial amount even with a Congress that's still incapable of moving forward with a comprehensive bill. So Robbie asked me to begin there and just say what's happening in the United States today in terms of action on the ground. I think Jonathan can follow up and talk a bit about what we have to look forward to with respect to authorities that the President has without resort to additional congressional legislation. But from his first days in office, I think that President Obama tried to again put this at the center of his attempts to try to in the depths of the worst recession we've seen since the Great Depression, make clean energy development a central part of the recovery of the United States economy. That process began with the stimulus package, the Recovery Act, that was passed shortly after he came into office, which had very important investments in this clean energy world. I just mentioned a couple, but to give you some perspective, the United States clean energy recovery package in 2009 was second only to China's, which spent over a couple $100 billion in trying to boost its economy during the worst of the recession. Likewise, in the United States, the Congress passed and the President signed into law and is now implementing legislation that spent about $90 billion on clean energy. That resulted in very substantial investments in smart grid, in electric efficiency, major investments in renewable energy. So at a time when the entire U.S. economy was really headed off the cliff, when unemployment was moving up to close to, it actually peaked over 10%, is now back to 9.6%. One of the few bright spots in the economy has been these investments on the clean energy side. In 2009, the United States installed about 10 gigawatts of wind. We're on track to install about another 17.5 gigawatts of wind over the course of the next 2 years. Very major investments now in large solar projects. That happened in part, I think, as a result of both that commitment to try to move the country in the right direction, and as a result of his putting in place a team of high-level people who are both quite knowledgeable about climate change and very dedicated and committed in his cabinet to trying to change the approach the United States has taken. My guess is that some of those people will be traveling with the President to India during his trip in November, but starting with Secretary Chu, who's now our Secretary of Energy, Nobel Prize winner from Lawrence Labs in California, John Holderman, who's a climate expert, who's a key science advisor, and Pig Walker, but a very substantial group of people who I think, unlike the previous administration, I might say so in a moment, I'll try not to be too partisan, but brought in a group of people who really were quite committed to doing it, including the Secretary of State. The other thing that I think he's been able to do is actually use some of the authority that he currently has to change the energy base. For the first time in 30 years, we've now increased fuel efficiency standards for our automobile fleet, which was a struggle that went on for many decades in the United States. That's happened. They've set in motion the ability to regulate and create fuel efficiency standards for heavy-duty trucks. There have been, under Secretary Chu's leadership, a whole new set of appliance efficiency standards that have gone into effect that over the course of 30 years will eliminate 2 years worth of coal-fired power, the CO2 emissions from coal-fired power in the United States. So a good deal of activity has gone on through the use of the ability to use existing authorities. I think the President also tried to realign the United States' position in the global negotiations in climate change in Copenhagen. He went to Copenhagen as you and negotiated directly with the basic group, and then finally to create the Copenhagen Accord, which he committed, I think, the United States to do a couple of things. One is to reduce emissions by 17% against 2005 levels by 2020, as well as to put together a package of financing, starting with the so-called quick start financing that would deal with forest and adaptation in the short term, and adding up to $100 billion worth of of financing per year to deal with those topics. Those are all works in progress. The President has not had the support that he needed in the United States Senate, as I noted, to get comprehensive legislation through the Senate at this stage. But he continues to work and continues to be committed. In an interview this week, he, in one of the newspapers in the United States, said that while he was disappointed that didn't happen, he was committed to trying to push forward on that next year. So I think the United States is, in fact, in the game, but I think both Jonathan and I would wish that they were further along in the game, but I think at least they're back trying to work the problem in a positive direction. So let me stop there and turn it over.
John, and I thank my friend Ravi Singh and WWF for getting us all of us here to talk about climate change. There was not many months ago, it was very fashionable to talk about climate change. But now suddenly fashion changes so fast, and in fact many stores had a welcome sale for winter, for summer, so it looks like the sale for climate change was over. So now you got to buy it, it's out of stock. But thank you very much for bringing it back, and we are talking about climate change again. In fact, globally, also it seems that climate change process of negotiation is completely derailed. In India, we are not surprised because we are not very much used to trains running on tracks all the time. So it's not very surprising to us. But very frustrating at the same time to see that climate change negotiations are no longer taken as seriously as they should have been. As you know, now in the next few weeks, they are going to be all supposed to be meeting in Cancun, and nobody is talking about it anymore. So thank you very much for bringing it back on track in a way of talking about it. US and India have been working very closely in many issues, geopolitically, diplomatically, economically. But on climate change, we have quite a divergent views on issues related to what action should be taken. In fact, most of the climate change negotiations anywhere in the world, you will find the very popular whipping boy is United States. So everybody will say, oh, US is not doing anything, so we must do something. So everybody will use a stick against the United States. But we really need to find out how the United States can be part of the process, because without them, we're not able to move on this multilaterally, internationally binding agreement that we really need to have. So it's really important that United States and India particularly, but United States and most of the other major economies of the world, and for that matter, United States have taken lead in many other matters, including Copenhagen. We should try to find out how we can get this process back on track and work towards bringing in internationally binding commitment for some time to come. So while that is happening, and while on the other hand, we are no longer talking about climate change, fortunately, the market is helping us to talk about climate change again. As Sir Nicholas Stern said that climate change still was a big market failure. But now the market forces are forcing us. If you saw it today, economic recovery, take some data coming from economic recovery, probably some of those who have a lot of oil already hoarded, they are waiting for the data to come. So now the oil has already become more than $80 per barrel. And it's now likely to go southward as the winters are approaching again. Secondly, the natural disasters are increasing at a much rapid pace. And the Russia, which has not signed or rather not ratified the Kyoto Protocol for a long time, now would be thinking that we should have ratified it much earlier. Now I don't think anybody, Putin or anybody can stand up to Russia and say, oh, we are against climate change because he's suffering because of that. Because there is a big demonstration in Kremlin against the climate change, against the part how the Russians handle that issue. So that, yeah, very recent. So it's really speaking, market forces are forcing us to think about it. The energy prices going up, natural disasters rising, and therefore there is already a thinking going on in the world to more towards a different new fuels which are renewable, which are clean, and which are definitely not coming from fossil fuel family. And this is a very welcome change that is taking place. So while we really need to address climate change at political level, at international level, there is also something that we really need to do to find out the cause of climate change which is possible and try to develop different sources. And there I see a huge possibility of working with the United States. Because US and India could work on that in a very significant manner and find out how we could develop those sources together. I am also of the firm belief that US technology and India's growing demand for energy. Because we are continuously going to add 25,000 megawatts of electricity every year after year. So there is a big appetite to add capacity, and on the other hand, there is a technology which we need. So if we can have that type of a marriage, it is extremely useful for us. The second issue in adaptation where India is really suffering because of climate change is as lack of action on part of the global community as well as all the big players, and next one countries like US and others, not to move on climate change. The temperature rise is going to put tremendous stress on India's agriculture. In fact, we are talking about 2 degrees centigrade which we accept at G20 level, but now we already started talking about 3.5 degrees. And as we always know that there is always a margin of error, and the margin of error is always on the wrong side, not on the right side. So 3.5 means obviously we exceed 4.5. That level India's agriculture can never sustain. Water resources of India will come under serious stress, and that could cause so much of social disorder in India. As it is, the agrarian crisis in India has put India into such a serious situation. But just imagine that crisis gets worse compounded because of this, what will happen to India? And that's something which is a cause of great concern for us, and therefore we really want to move on climate change in a significant way, particularly in the adaptation, and in that, particularly agriculture and water resources mainly. Of course, fisheries is another area because sea level rise is going to put a lot of stress on that, and of course, being a little selfish, being my constituency from rural area, from coastal area, so my constituents will not say that you never talk about it, so let me talk about it. So that again is an issue which is going to cause a lot of stress, and India has about 7,600 kilometers of coastline on either side, east and west of India. So this is something which is really a great concern for us. Employment is going to be under stress. So let us find out ways of how, while US must take the lead, India must support to bring this climate change negotiation back on track, and we must move on a multilateral negotiation. But at the same time, how can we work on working together?
The panel and it goes like this, that you see almost 50% of the emissions get in from the energy sector, like power plants, and as we were talking about the renewable. While on one side there is an R&D required, on the other side there is also a lot of application requirement. So it's not a rocket science, it is happening already. For instance, in US, how do we apply those good practices into India, for example? Recently, a regulation which has come from the CRC, the regulatory board on the heating plants. Now that has come as a peak tariff regulation draft, but it has a huge impact in terms of land, water, carbon, in so many aspects. While we are putting these initiatives in place, probably we are looking at it from one angle, but that one angle also has so many other encompassing facets. And today I think it is very important to look at these regulations, the policy framework, not only from one aspect but also link it with the future direction, how it will impact in terms of the overall environment. For instance, our organization is working very closely in US market, and we see that in the US market with the similar kind of regulations, there is a huge amount of saving into these aspects. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that how do we see these practical application of the existing technologies which can bring synergy in terms of reducing the emissions and doing good to the globe. So these are comments I wanted to make to the panel and take your views.
I have a question regarding the fact that given the political deadlock in the United States and lack of political will at a broader sort of macro level, do you think some of the market-based mechanisms that are existing in the US, whether it's RGGI or with Western Climate Initiative or Midwestern initiatives that are actually happening, whether those at some level will really continue in the right kind of, will present the right kind of framework and really drive some of the emissions that the Obama administration has actually legislated or is in the process of legislating?
second question, but I want to link the two questions. We just recently did a report at my center looking at, relevant to the cross-border discussion, looking at the 50 states policies, which in the United States system, the states are the regulators of power production, power transmission, and power usage. To find those states that had built-in policy that drove the greatest efficiency in the system. Why did we do that? We did it in hopes that the states that were laggards would learn from the states that were leaders. And I think that lesson can actually be applied, not completely, but I think it can be applied across borders. I mentioned the European example earlier. That there's much to learn from the way we regulate these markets to try to get enhanced efficiency out of the overall regulatory system. And hopefully that'll have some impact. With respect to, I just say one word and then turn it over to Jonathan. There's a major challenge to this going on right now. I think that we could count on the states, we have counted on the states, to fill in gaps that have been missing when the federal government's been unable to act. But there is on the ballot in the November midterm election in California, there's a challenge to the most aggressive of these systems, which is the so-called California AB 32 system to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's largely been a ballot initiative that's been funded by out-of-state oil, principally by the oil industry from out of the state of California. But that's a serious challenge to that entire regime. There's a lot of effort being put into beating back that initiative. In my own view, if it passes, that's a tremendous setback for the United States. On the other hand, if it fails, I think it might be the first signal that we can regain momentum.
Showed that if all of the states that have measures in place, either at the executive level or creating carbon reduction markets, went ahead and implemented what they had in place, that would get us about a 2% additional reduction below business as usual. So as a model, it's extremely important. In terms of quantitative reductions, it's only a beginning. Almost all modern U.S. environmental legislation has started at the state level. States have demonstrated it, and then it's been passed at the federal level. I think you see that here as well. And now there are cities that are also demonstrating. So I don't want to underestimate the importance of that model, but quantitatively it's not very big.
We'll take these two questions. First one. Good question.
Yes, this very brief, and it is from Mr. Godrej. I believe that Godrej has perhaps the country's best consumer products network and distribution systems and retail outlets. Will we see a day when there will be solar energy products available as off-the-shelf consumer products instead of having to go to some agency or some NGO and so on?
Let me take that question.
I think it's led by the panelists, particularly John Podesta and Aspen Suresh Prabhu and Mr. Godrej. I look at the whole question from an entirely different perspective. In vain does the man pretend to vie with nature. The whole question of energy, the whole question of climate change, could be related to sun above and river on earth. Have we been able to manage it by our research, by our technology, by our scientific know-how, and the utilization of this tremendous source of energy for the people on earth? Even in today's newspaper, I think there was a small problem for this, that all over in America, in Japan, in China and India, we have seen, and we are seeing it today. rivers have been a source of human cruelty. Could we turn into some kind of kindness that nature has bountifully given us? Thank you.
Going to slowly, you're talking of consumer solar products, which is solar lamps and those type of things. Well, I think NGOs have played a huge role, especially in rural areas, in getting these out there. And they are much better equipped to do these things. And I think you will find slowly, like you see now, for instance, Hindustan Lever has started with the water filter. Tatas have started with their water filter, which is aimed directly. ITC has got, through the e-Chopal, they put through a whole bunch of other sustainable products. So like that, you will see that happening. But I think you will still find that the non-government sector will be still very, very active in this area for a long time to come before it becomes mainstream for companies.
About rivers. You have to talk to us about
In fact, this is a really fundamental issue. If you had cared for nature, there wouldn't be any problem. And that's the real problem. In fact, there is no other problem except that problem. And in fact, there's a very typical thing that if you don't trouble nature, trouble will never trouble you. But nature, we are troubled so much that that's how it is. And in fact, that's what science says now. See, this climate has been changing. It is not a new phenomenon that climate is changing like this. But climate change has always been changing from ice age to so many different phases that we have passed through. But this is something which is human-induced. And that's the problem. And therefore, human is the problem. So there is no doubt about it. And actually, the real problem is human itself. And then we are, but we are so intelligent, so clever, that we are finding out, inventing new reasons to blame each other, finding out so many problems. The real problem lies within us. So if we can change ourselves, there is no problem. But how to change ourselves is the challenge. And that's what we have to really find out. Because even you accept what you are saying, and I fully endorse that. Now the challenge is, we accepted it, so what do you do? How do you solve this? Can we write more newspaper articles like one you read in the morning? Is that a solution? Then we can write more. So we can actually have to really think about, having known what the problem is, we have to actually look ourselves, that's the real problem. And in fact, if you really look at it, there is no other creature on the world. We are also part of biodiversity. Human beings are also part of biodiversity. But we are the only creature who are trying to take as much more than what we require. There is no one else who does like this. And that's why it's a problem. So I think we really need to change human beings. And how to change human beings? Only human beings have to divide. That's not the problem. If somebody else will do it, there's no problem.
Last two questions.
While I would like to ask if there is a legislation or enough focus in the government to reduce black powder immediately. So the effects of black powder can be mitigated faster than long-term issues. I'm not saying don't do that, but is there any legislation on?
Black carbon is not just technology. It's unfortunately it's an issue which is actually a social dimension, and it's a failure of the system that we are not able to get it because it's a forced condition. It's not something which is coming out, and it's a failure of the system. It will not provide the type of activity that we should have provided. So I agree with you, but this is a failure on our part. It's a failure of public policy, failure of the government for so many years. We are not able to accomplish this. So I agree. So how to do it, we know it, but there are enough number of schemes for the government to actually address this, but these are not happening.
We will talk about black carbon because they are the ones who are affected most. So if you're from Uttarakhand, I know exactly what you're saying. Take two questions together. You sir, then Robert.
About new technology in the field of energy cost saving, new technologies in water and environment. There is a thought that I have been carrying. I want to know the I want to know how the panel looks at it. there is so much of global concern about climate change. The technology has made it possible to intensively interact and share and collaborate and partner in developmental work. Has some thought been given to the possibility that the duplication of efforts which might be going on in the various academia, research organizations, corporates can be somehow streamlined so that we come closer to our objective faster?
Thank you, Robert Dobbs, European Union. First of all, thanks to all panelists for me making commercials for the European Union. That saves me. Just an addition to Mr. Brown's pessimistic view, we are almost at minus 20% compared to 1990 levels. Also thanks to partly the recession, of course. But there's an opportunity that has been discussed. What I would like to stress is that, yes, technology is fine. Of course, we need that. That's a very important part. And energy labeling and appliances all fine. And Robbie, you don't mind, you know me long enough. But do we really, if we have all these energy saving lamps, do you really need that many? At the end of the day,
we switch them off.
No, but I'm serious. I mean, if you have very low energy consuming television sets, but you still have 3 in your house, at the end of the day, you still use more energy. So now the serious question, but this is much serious. And there's also an issue still, and your point about the mankind. We never have enough indeed. So we translate our needs into material goods instead of having a good environment. Now serious question to our American guest. Some years ago when we started this whole energy and climate debate, the then negotiators said the American way of life is not negotiable. What is now the standpoint in the United States in the population? Because at the end of the day, the voters, as you mentioned, the consumers, they will decide. Is that now something which they accept that something should be a bit more rational about the uses not only of energy but also water? I mean, only 1% of the world's water is accessible drinking water, but we still flush our toilets with it, or we wash our cars with it. I mean, as in Europe, as in the US, I think our lifestyle should be negotiable. Is that something you see happening in the US?
In the last 2 days, it's the third time in the last 2 days I've heard that comment by an American negotiator being quoted back to us. I think we'll never live it down.
I was there, so I know.
Yeah. I can't imagine an American politician telling Americans, you're going to have to change your way of life. I can imagine an argument that a different way of life is far preferable. We've really seen a change even in the last few years in what people drive. And we're seeing very rapid change in expectations about energy. I think consumers can change from quantity to information quality and choice in consumption quite quickly as we offer them that option. My concern really goes to the earlier question, which is this will happen. The way of life will change because people will prefer it, but not fast enough. We have to find ways to accelerate those choices. I see this as a question for all of us about managing human expectations and changing values, and that's really what leadership is about.
Well, just two words there. One is that there's already been a kind of profound effect of the recession. The United States was, in fact, sucking up a lot of GDP growth in the world as a result of it. So there was a kind of symbiotic relationship of consumers in the United States, which is gone. people are deleveraging, and just as an economic phenomenon. I think that my parents grew up in the Depression, and I kind of lived, and probably still do, live with Depression-era habits. I don't think we've hit that stage in the United States. But I think that there's a rethink about what we need, what we want, what we're going to do. I think particularly in the auto sales side, you saw a complete collapse of essentially SUV market. So I think there are changes going on in the United States. I think they need to be. I think that it's not just political leadership, but cultural leadership that matters in this regard. And with respect to the gentleman's question in the back, we actually spent our morning discussing that issue. There's a real question, I think, of being two things. One is to create more collaboration across the efforts to move best practices, best technologies, best business models, etc. through the system. There's a second issue that one of our colleagues identified, which is there's very little documentation of what works and what doesn't. That I think is in part a process of philanthropic investment in this arena, in which projects are invested in, they're reviewed, they're judged a success or not a success, but there's very little documentation and very little best practice that moves from one place to the next, from one country to the next. So I think it's important that we build a stronger, essentially, information set and ways in which we can collaborate more so that we can increase the pace of innovation in this area through common knowledge and shared experience.
Sushma, would you like to bring these are the issues which are great concern to us, great concern to US, and great concern to global community. So what we accomplish here, the spin-off will be the global good that can go out from these particular initiations. So I look forward to that, and I'm very happy again that we together are talking and thinking about doing something together. Thank you.
Global environmental think tank that convenes people and institutions around analysis to create change. We've worked with partners in India on a variety of issues for 15 years or more, sustainable transport, promoting small and medium enterprise with sustainable business plans, working at the sectoral level on greenhouse gas measurement, working on electricity governance and open processes. Since 1982, when we were founded, we have focused a significant part of our work on the climate issue. So almost 30 years, I can't say we're exactly basking in success yet. I have to say that the title of this afternoon's discussion is a little bit of a fraud. U.S. and India tackling climate change together. I know we all wish it were so. We're working on the together part, and John and I are certainly working on getting the U.S. to tackle the issue. I wish we'd moved as far in the last few years as India has. Certainly, from an economic standpoint, tackling climate change, I believe, would be an enormous opportunity for the United States. A country that has always prospered through technological change, and this is, after all, a great technological challenge and opportunity for the creation of new markets. But it looks as if India and China will move ahead of us into those markets. It's certainly a matter of environmental urgency. We saw in this past year not only record warmth, but the effects of climate from Siberia to Greenland, and that's the product of only 0.8 degrees, less than 1 degree of warming. As Suresh was saying, we're committed to a great deal more than that. But the fact is that the U.S. political climate right now was not favorable for President Obama to succeed in getting legislation. I was surprised. If you had told me 2 years ago that Barack Obama would be president, would strongly back the passage of comprehensive legislation, that legislation would pass the United States House of Representatives in 2009, that India and China would come to Copenhagen with their hand stretched out saying, we're willing to make commitments. We want to see the U.S. step up and make similar commitments. I would have been certain that the U.S. would adopt comprehensive legislation, and that's failed. I want to take just a couple of minutes to talk about what I think the U.S. can do even without legislation, and what I think will happen in the next few years. About a year ago, the World Resources Institute, anticipating at that point that there was some doubt that legislation would pass, decided to do a comprehensive review of all of the existing authority in the federal government and at our state level, our regional level, to reduce emissions. So ranging from the power of the executive to improve gas mileage of vehicles, the power that the President has already exercised, to the power of our Environmental Protection Agency to regulate carbon dioxide as a pollutant, to the power of our Department of Energy to impose regulations on the efficiency of appliances, to the power of our Federal Aviation Authority to begin to control the way airports and airplanes are operated to reduce emissions. More than a score of federal agencies have existing authority that can be used to reduce emissions, and which, if President Obama is serious about the commitment he made to the world, he will exercise in the next several years. In addition, a number of U.S. states have pursued their own policies to reduce emissions. In analyzing all of that, but recognizing that the use of that authority is a matter of political will, of political choice, we looked at several different scenarios, ranging from one that is basically doing the minimum to a scenario in which the authority is being used aggressively, and concluded that by 2020, using that authority aggressively, it would be possible for the U.S., even without passing legislation, to achieve a 14% reduction compared to the 17% that the President committed to. I know John strongly believes, and I hope he's correct, that there are additional measures that could be taken that would make the difference. What I think is important to recognize is that even though we have failed to take the steps that I earnestly believe are necessary and to our advantage, it's highly probable that U.S. emissions will continue to go down over the next 10 years rather than begin to rise. They're now below 2005 levels because of a combination of policy and economic recession. I believe that both the authority that exists in law and the economics of our energy industry will continue to drive emissions down, so we will still have some opportunity in the future to achieve the goals that I think the international community has rightly recognized are essential. I'd make one other observation about a situation in which we have failed to live up to what would seem like our international obligations. I saw a picture of the group in Copenhagen that negotiated finally to achieve the Copenhagen Accord. I know that people generally feel that that was much too weak, too little, and represented a process that was not fair. But it's important to recognize that in the room that finally, where the agreement was finally reached, were 5 heads of state: President Obama and the 4 basic countries, China, India, Brazil, and South Africa. I think that represents a fundamental shift in the way these decisions will be made in the future, and represented the fundamental change in the drivers of economic development and political power in the world. So I think it's entirely right, Suresh, for you to be saying, in the absence of U.S. leadership, we can't stop. We need to supply the leadership. That's my hope for the future, is that if the U.S. can't lead, at least it will follow.
So I'm Jamshid Godrej, and on the board of Aspen as well as WWF and WRI. So it's interesting for me that we're talking about this topic between India and the US. And what is most interesting, I find, is that even though we have moved quite rapidly in India on many fronts, the effect of this is yet to be seen across the board in India. I think that it's good for us to recognize that we were a slow starter on the climate issue, and we were really stuck in the old paradigm that we had, which is that we will not negotiate except on a per capita emissions basis. I think the pragmatism that the Prime Minister has brought to negotiating not just on climate but on a number of issues to do with India's development has, I think, made a huge difference in our approach and our ability to make that change that we were looking for. And the Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change has set up a number of groups. They are all either made their reports or in the process of making their reports. And I think that the commitments that were made by the Prime Minister in Copenhagen of emissions intensity reduction to GDP will clearly be achieved in India. I think historically we have been reducing our emissions intensity over the last 15 years in any case. And over the next 15 years we will reduce it significantly more, in my opinion, than what we have already committed to. And I think the question for us really is how much more can we do? And it's not just achieving those commitments that is really important for India. It's really what we can do beyond it. And because, as Suresh has said, livelihoods in India, especially in agriculture, which includes fisheries, to a very, very large extent now, will depend on what we do in India and what the rest of the world does. I think Suresh also talked about water and water resources. This is an area of huge concern to us. Even though Jairam Ramesh, the Environment Minister, has always said at every function and whenever he can that forest cover in India has actually increased and not decreased. But the fact is that the quality of the forest in India has degraded significantly. And this is a matter of great concern to us. And as you all know, water resources and forest cover are very closely intertwined. So what have we done today? I think if you look at industry first, energy efficiency for industry in India has been very much at the top of the agenda for a large number of years, mainly because the cost of energy in India for industry was very high, the availability was uncertain, and industry put a lot of effort in energy efficiency measures because the business case for investment in energy efficiency was extremely strong. And it is not unusual today in industry to make interventions where the paybacks are less than a year, and in almost all cases less than 2 to 3 years. So that business case for doing energy efficiency in industry is extremely strong, and that's why it's got so much traction. The second thing is that there is slowly now a recognition partly because of regulation, but partly also because of availability, that water as a resource, even though it's really very, very inexpensive, not just in India, I think it's inexpensive in most parts of the world, but being such a scarce resource, industry has now, as I said, partly due to regulation and partly due to availability, the recycling and reuse of water in industry has become absolutely imperative. You cannot today set up industry anywhere in India, no matter where you are, without a significant amount or almost all the water being reused and having zero discharge. I think this is absolutely crucial for us. Water discharge and water recovery, for instance, in our factories in Bombay, it is the cost of recycling retreated and recycled water for use in industry is half the cost of buying it from the Bombay Municipal Corporation. And so the business case, again, for water conservation and water recycling is extremely strong. On top of that, industry has now started carbon disclosure on a voluntary basis. I think WRI has done a huge amount of pioneering work in greenhouse gas protocols and measurement, and the voluntary, the large number of Indian companies now do voluntary disclosure of carbon. I think we know the government has been talking about regulation in this area, including mandatory measurement of carbon and other CO2s and other NOx gases. And I think we are going to very soon come to a stage where we will have to start reporting on a mandatory basis. So it's very heartening that industry has actually taken this on as a challenge and is doing it voluntarily today. The third area is that if you see some of the regulation that's coming out of the Prime Minister's councils, we now have mandatory labeling for home appliances, which is air conditioners, refrigerators, just recently washing machines, and electric power lights and motors and pumps, and they're all in the way. I think that within the next 3 years, every electrically driven appliance or anything electrically driven is going to have an energy label in India. That's the way we are moving. The interesting thing is that if you take refrigerators and air conditioners, where my company is involved, the consumer demand for the highly energy efficient appliance is actually the strongest. The business case for the consumer to buy a 5-star air conditioner or a 5-star refrigerator is so strong today that 40 to 50% of the demand is in that area today. We never expected that. The thing that's going to happen is mandatory fuel efficiency norms for automobiles. I think the voluntary stage is going to start very soon, within the next few months, and the mandatory phase will start next year, again with a labeling program. And I think again consumers I think are going to pick up very, very strongly on the labeling program for cars. Right now it's only for cars, but it will extend it to 2-wheelers and to 4-wheelers, trucks, etc. Pretty soon. So I think we're moving in a direction, through regulation and through voluntary action, which is really making the behavior of industry change very rapidly. Which is why I'm saying that I'm very confident that we will meet our commitments that we have made in Copenhagen. Also, if you see the building sector, if you take all the energy in the building sector put together, which is residential, commercial, factories, etc., about 40% of energy usage goes in the building sector. And this movement that CII started about 8 years ago of green buildings has really picked up huge amount of traction now. And we have a dozen or more large developers in India who have pledged that every one of their future developments will be a green building, which would be a rated building, it could be a LEED rated building or any other rating program. But the rating program essentially locks in the energy, the water, the daylighting, the air quality, these are the essential features of green buildings. And so I think that's something that's moving very rapidly. As you know, urbanization in India is moving very, very fast. And the expectation is that by, say, 2050, 70 to 80% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 are still not built. So we have this opportunity now, because we are expanding in such a large way, of making all of those buildings green buildings. So if 80% of our stock of buildings by 2050 actually are green buildings, that's a huge saving in energy and water, etc. And the other aspect of urbanization, where WRI is deeply involved, is on mobility, urban mobility. And WRI has a program called Embark, which promotes bus rapid transit and other mobility such as cycles, walking, etc. Throughout the world. It's got a lot of traction in Central and South America, and very recently in the city of Ahmedabad, they have now implemented the first phase of their citywide bus rapid transit system, which will be 90 kilometers in total. And I think, I don't want to criticize it on intending, it's received enough criticism over time, but I think it's a joy to see the one in Ahmedabad, because it has been designed correctly from the beginning. And the consumer is now actually giving up his car, his or her car, and moving to the bus system, because it has been designed so well, and it has all the features of a bus rapid transit, which is that you can enter and exit at a level, the platforms are built at a level, it's in the center, and all the other safety features that go with it are put in place. And in fact, WRI and Embark are doing a big study in India on road safety. And I was myself very, very surprised to find some of the findings in that, which is that I always felt that the maximum number of accidents on the road in India are from the three-wheelers, rickshaws. The fact is, it's the other way around. They have the lowest rate of accidents of any type of vehicle that runs. And so I think these are the type of facts that once they come out, we will be able to revolutionize this mobility. We know that living in the cities in India, what mobility means, and the opportunity of saving energy and adding to safety on the roads through these type of mobility interventions is enormous. So I think if you see the breadth and extent of the interventions in India, a lot of it through regulation, but a lot of it also that is done voluntarily. It's quite amazing. You know, this whole issue in the US over the last few years, there was a big argument about cap and trade and carbon tax. And you just heard both Jonathan and John talk about the US political process and what has happened. But the fact is that in India, in the last budget, we introduced a carbon tax. It's not well known, but the fact is that there is a carbon tax now in India, and the tax is on both domestic coal as well as on imported coal. And that money, which should be $750 to $1 billion very soon on an annual basis, will be used then for promoting R&D in renewable energy and promoting renewable energy and providing the type of subsidies that have been announced, say for solar energy. So I think that we're doing a lot of things that are right. We have to see the benefit and effect of all this over time. But it is very good and heartening to know that industry has embraced it, that civil society has embraced it, and I think there is a lot of interest in India in these areas. But eventually it has to spread out, which means it has to affect agriculture, it has to affect other natural landscapes, etc. around the country, which I hope would be the next stage. So I'm sorry that was a little long, but I thought I should mention these points.
I'd like to focus now for discussion and questions. I think the best way would be we take 2 or 3 questions together and put it to a panel. They could just comment on it. Kamal, would you like to go first?
The 330,000 megawatts of powder coal generated electricity, which produces about 1/3 of USA's carbon dioxide and 8% of the world's total. China has aspirations of producing fresh power 80,000 megawatts a year. India between 25 and 40,000 megawatts a year. Now, President Obama could certainly say that I'm going to convert all this 335,000 megawatts in 10 years into renewable energy, and this will cost additional $3 million or about $3 million a megawatt, which is something like about $770 billion, which translates to about $78 billion a year, which is still workable. But then if he said that, well, I need to finance China and India also, that means $170 billion a year for China, another $85 billion a year for India, and also then say that next time around, please elect me as president, it won't happen. So the question is, this 170 and 85, the $250 billion a year, not forthcoming from either EU or from US or from anywhere else. So the question then comes, what can the president do which will enable India and China to invest in renewable energy? That's the simple question in simple terms. And today, when we find that the differential in terms of renewable versus coal energy is roughly about $2 million a megawatt, I think what he could do is perhaps, like President Kennedy, get up and say that in the next decade, in the next 10 years, US R&D, along with possibly India CSIR scientists, will work and bring down the capex for producing energy to $1.2 million a megawatt at 2010 prices. And how do you fund this research? And I have a suggestion. Today, US petroleum prices or gasoline prices are $2.70 a gallon roughly. And UK prices are $4 a gallon higher. Now what if there is a surcharge, not a tax, of $4 a gallon on US gasoline, which is about 140 billion gallons per year from just gasoline, not diesel. This would generate about $560 billion a year. Now, Americans don't like taxes, we all know that. And they also want the freedom to drive maybe half a dozen Hummer cars, that's fine. The suggestion would be that this $4 a gallon is not a tax but a surcharge. And this is put into a separate account where the US citizen can take whatever they spent on the gasoline and use it for paying for education for under 25s, healthcare for over 50s, or give it to a university, and whatever balance is there goes to DOE to fund for research. The advantages would be green jobs staying in the US, education pumping up, which is a need in the US, healthcare, which is again another need in the US, and if the author from New York Times, I'm forgetting his name, Tom Friedman is to be believed, well, there is a direct linkage between crude oil prices and terrorism. If this be true, then you solve security issues, economy problems, job problems, education problems, and health problems all in one go, and also help India and China in making choices. If plants are available in renewable energy at $1.2 million a megawatt, I think Indian and Chinese would be mad in setting up any other plant other than renewables. So it will automatically happen. But I think he has to get up and make such a speech as President Kennedy did to say that in this decade, I'm going to manage it, which he did. So I think if the Americans decide to do it, it can be done, but it will not be great pain also, because you know that you're creating jobs, the money is coming back to you, you have the power to write checks against that amount which you put in the petrol pump, for example, and it could be workable. I'd like you to comment on it. Thank you.
I think we'll take it. So,
I think that I just make a couple of comments here. One is in this context, I think China and India you need to separate. In terms of financing China's clean energy development, they seem to be doing quite fine on their own. They've gone from 10% of solar production a decade ago to 45% production now. I think they may have now surpassed the United States in wind installation. I think they did that in 2009. Their commitment to clean energy, to smart grid, to installation of the next generation of energy technology, I think is in its own national interest. I think they see those as the industries of the future. They want to lead in them. High-speed rail, I could go down the list. So they've made massive investments in this, and I don't think that they're looking to the United States to, we're borrowing money from them, not vice versa. I think that you began the question about who's going to finance the Chinese movement really and the Indian movement into clean energy technologies. The United States can be a global leader, which is on research and development to drive into new technologies, drive the cost down on existing renewables. I think is a point very well taken. I think a $4 surcharge on gasoline is, quite frankly, is highly unlikely. The idea of actually putting fee on oil was included in that comprehensive legislation. And that money was being plowed back into substantial investments in research and development to the tune of about $50 million a year. The investments that the President made, I mentioned in the Recovery Act, included very substantial investments in the R&D side as well, the creation of what we call ARPA-E, the Advanced Research Program for energy. That was modeled on the defense investments that led to substantial development of the information technology industry. But more needs to be done, more money needs to go into it, and I think that you're focusing on also the co-benefit of actually raising the price of fuel that is actually leading to insecurity in the United States and certainly climate insecurity globally, in order to have the, if you will, the co-benefit of reducing the use of it. Presumably, one of the effects of that will be fewer vehicle miles traveled, more efficient vehicles, investments in new technology in the transportation fleet, and that being a mechanism to fund R&D, I think is really actually quite a sound one, and one that, as the comprehensive bill broke down, I actually think we can imagine in the United States moving on that, with that essentially dynamic or that paradigm. I just think the United States will impose that level of price that quickly over the next couple of years. Something on the order of what was included in that legislation, which ratchets up over a period of time, which was based on the carbon content of the fuel source itself. I think that's very much alive and an option, and one that could be pushed forward in the upcoming Congress.
Just a 30-second addition. I liked everything about your proposal except that you left out diesel. There's no reason for us to leave out diesel. There was a great debate a couple of decades ago about the idea of taxing bads, not goods, right? Tax carbon and reduce taxes, good deal written in India at the time. That idea seems to have sort of slipped off the agenda now that we've had such difficulty in enacting a cap and trade proposal. It may be that those kinds of ideas are going to surface again in the next few years in the U.S.
To our American guests, be perhaps even more reasonable to look more concentratedly to Europe, single nations which have a
long tradition of environmental movement, and I wanted to ask Mr. Godrej if, for instance, in the industry sector, aren't many Indian companies also looking to experiences in energy preservation, etc., drawn in Europe? And to our American guests, how would you involve the European experiences in your efforts?
I was Europe anyway, unless you go from the other side. So therefore Europe is of course an important component of whatever we talk about, and there is always a very willingness, very proactive role of for European Union, EU28, particularly in the climate change negotiation always. So EU has been one of the principal supporters, but unfortunately even the European Union, as we have seen in the particularly last few months, there is no such appetite for moving on the climate change in a significant way. In the last few months we are seeing now. Otherwise European Union was a strong champion of deal on climate change. But somehow this also has happened unfortunately, and therefore I think it's also largely because of the economic crisis. And most of the countries are facing these difficult times, people are losing jobs. So now the challenge is how to get the economy back rather than giving Right now, everybody, the European Union particularly last year, the struggle was to save banks rather than saving the planet. So in fact, that is one of the reasons why there is problem. But I think hopefully the European Union also will join hands and start working.
I think one of the things about Europe has been, especially in Germany, for instance, if you see the feed-in tariffs that were given for renewables, including Spain, I think many of those were completely unsustainable. So I think we have to be also very careful to learn from the mistakes that have been made around the world, whether in Europe or America or wherever, and not repeat those. And I think that some of the things we are doing today may also lead us that way. For instance, we've announced feed-in tariffs for solar, which are extremely lucrative. But what we should have done is that we should have announced that this is for the first year or the first 5 years, and then we will come down as technology improves, etc. We haven't done that. We need to do that sort of thing. Otherwise, we may also get locked in to some of these problems. And Spain and Germany don't have those support anymore because with the difficulty now they have to give them up. So I think there is a lot to learn both ways, good and bad.
Needs of global players in the solution. The Europeans are clearly racing ahead in both on the technology development side, as well as the sort of process development side. So Jamshid said that we've got to avoid the mistakes that were made here. The feed-in tariffs were unsustainable. That doesn't necessarily make them mistakes, in my view. I mean, first of all, they created global leading companies in Germany, Denmark, Spain, in renewables. They also learned a lot about grid management, bringing renewables into the system. They're world class in that regard. I think we've got a lot to learn from those companies and those systems that actually produce very strong outcomes. I wouldn't exclude Japan from that as well, in terms of trying to provide both the technological knowledge, the business knowledge, the finance knowledge to move the entire world system from a high carbon to low carbon base. We need all the partners, and we need to exclude the fewest people as possible. I think that the bilateral partnership between the U.S. and India on the energy front is part of a larger mature relationship between the U.S. and India. I came with President Clinton in 2000 on his trip to India, and I think through President Bush and President Obama, our larger strategic relationship between the U.S. and India has deepened. And part of that has been built around a partnership on clean energy. So I think I wouldn't separate the bilateral energy partnership from the overall strategic relationship between our two countries. but clearly it shouldn't be at the exclusion of other major players who have a lot to bear. Last thing I would say is that if you look to a topic we haven't talked about, which is but that's very critical to solve in the climate debate on forestry, and particularly on avoiding deforestation. Again, you see European nations in the lead, particularly Norway and now France, in trying to move globally towards systems that are investing in both good governance and good practice and putting resources on the table to avoid further deforestation, which is really critical to solving the climate process, and then to tackle the process of reforestation in places like India, where I think actually the United States has quite a bit of technical ability and capacity and will be brought to bear, I think, in the context of a bilateral relationship.
Greek bailout, German business confidence hit a 3-year high. Germany will be at 30% renewables for its electricity supply system. If we were at 30% by then, the world would be a very different place. And we just hosted an event for the head of the German Environment Analytical Agency to do a presentation of their findings on how using existing technology they can achieve 100% by 2050. That's for an industrial economy that only a few years ago was largely coal-based.
And the actual good story is Scandinavia.
You mentioned about the comprehensive some kind of legislation. Does it refer to global climate governance and with special reference to US? As far as I can see, it has 4 different dimensions to address. One could be the economic aspect, one is energy security aspect, one is the environmental security aspect, and maybe the domestic funding of the climate projects, both by private sector and private players. Now, how do you feel optimistically that this will address these 4 dimensions of the global climate governance issues in the US?
You want to on 9/11, loss after human life was energy as a most. What energy management and what's being done on energy on demand, wherein lights on Delhi streets are not lit all the time and they are lit only when a passerby goes by. Thanks.
Sure possibility in the next few years that there will be comprehensive legislation, because there's every reason to believe our Congress will become more hostile to climate legislation rather than less. If we had passed something like what passed our lower house in 2009, it did include both provisions to drive domestic reductions and provisions for the U.S. to participate effectively in an international regime. That might not mean that we were aligned with India's view of what would be an equitable international regime, but at least that was a starting point. Where we are now, the analysis I was giving, is what the President can do through existing power under existing laws without action by the Congress. And that's entirely domestic. He does have power under our Constitution with regard to international relations, and he has said the U.S. will continue to seek a global agreement. But I'm at least pessimistic